call this meeting of Lima City Council to order. We'll begin tonight's meeting with the invitation by Councilor Tebben, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Lord, please help guide us as we perform the business of the city this evening. Help us to make the best decisions in favor of all the residents of the city. Thank you for this wonderful weather and the Star Spangled Spectacular and all of the volunteers and sponsors who made that event possible and a wonderful success. Amen.
Amen. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll have the clerk call the roll.
Mr. Gordon?
Here.
Mr. McLean?
Here.
Mr. Lowe?
Here.
Mr. Teppan?
Here.
Miss Adams?
Here.
Mr. Glenn?
Here.
Mrs. Miles?
Here.
And Mr. Nixon.
Here. Are there any amendments to tonight's agenda?
Yes, Mr. President, if we could, we want to remove Sandra Graham from the privilege of the floor, and we want to add a human resource report.
Second. The motion and the second is to revise tonight's agenda, amend tonight's agenda by removing Sandra Graham from privilege of the floor and adding the Human Resources Committee report to reports of committees. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? The motion carries. First on the agenda tonight is the public hearing number 3 for the CDBG allocations. And we'll open that public hearing. I'll ask anybody interested in speaking to the allocations for CDBG funding for the 2014-2015 funding year to step forward, state your name and address for the record, and make your comments. Is there anybody that would like to speak to the issue of the CDBG allocations?
Good evening, Council. My name is Phil Hain. I'm the CEO of United Way of Greater Lima, and I'm asking you to reconsider the recommendation that there will be no funding for United Way in the grant writing project in this year's CDBG. I believe we were able to provide each one of you an updated report with regards to our activities and our work and the number of nonprofits that we have been engaged in during this first year. It's been our experience this first year that we've had to do a great deal of more capacity building with our nonprofits than what we anticipated. And so we've been doing a lot of training and working with them to build their capacity in order to be able to seek funding as well as to administer funding, which is just as important as the grant writing aspect of it. So this is where we've increased our support using our grant writer to do that. And to date, we've been involved with probably 20-plus organizations, of which I believe I provided you a list of all those organizations, and we are scheduled again to do more work with them in August. I think one really bright spot that's occurred most recently is that we're working in a major collaboration effort, mainly around workforce development issues, and we anticipate early next year submitting a fairly substantial federal grant around youth and workforce development. But that has only come because of our ability to develop the capacity amongst organizations to do that kind of work. We have submitted some grants this year, but clearly not at the level that we had hoped, but that's because we did not see the capacity there in order to do that. So I ask you to reconsider our request for $27,500, which is less than what we requested last year because we were able to find a way to do that more efficiently and at less cost. So I just thank you for your reconsideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to speak to the CDBG hearing?
Good evening, Council, Mayor. My name is Vicki Sherelds. I am the Executive Director of the Cheryl Allen Southside Community Center, 1802 South Central. When I first took over as Executive Director of the center, I jumped through so many hoops trying to get funding. I felt like I could challenge Michael Jordan to an air hoops contest. The United Way kept saying, if you do this, this, and this, we might be able to consider funding. And I jumped through the hoops, and then they'd say, well, that was a great effort. but we're not going to fund you. But please keep trying. I looked at other partners, approached a lot of groups, but because of the past discrepancies at the center, no one wanted me on their team. So we decided we would see how far we could come alone. I discussed with our boards the needs of the center and that we could better help the community if we housed the neighborhood association. I spoke with Amy Odom and Connie Dersham, and they felt that with all that we were doing at the center, it might be better if we joined an existing group. And they invited me to be a part of the Care Academy to learn more about how the city worked. So I did the class, not just for the knowledge, but also for the $500 that's offered for any sponsoring group. I found out about 2 weeks before graduation that we weren't eligible for the $500 because we were not a neighborhood association. So I learned a lot, but it was still another empty hoop as far as money was concerned. Our Daddies at Work program put in a bid to be considered for property maintenance this summer. We jumped through hoop after hoop. I was challenging Michael Jordan again. We got the necessary insurance, we got the workman's comp, we got more equipment. We even took the men through all kinds of training and twists and turns and everything, and we weren't even considered, really. The maintenance is being done by the same people as last year. So we were in the hole for not only our wasted efforts and the money that we spent that we really didn't have. So it's no secret that I've been the director at the center since the latter part of November of 2012 without a salary, but I believe that if we could demonstrate to the residents of the South Side and the community as a whole how important the mission of the center is and how well we could have a measurable impact on the quality programming that we have for our residents, that things would begin to change for us financially. But I was only half right. The usage of the center, the expectation for our program, the sheer numbers of the lives improved has been outstanding. The financial benefits, not so much. So now comes the CDBG time. And Ms. Adams stated last week that the process that Councilman Glenn put into place was not followed by anyone. But I'm here to tell you that I went to every one of those meetings. In fact, I was sometimes the only one at those meetings. I spoke with Amy to express my concern on some of the stipulations that the money was to go to a low and moderate income to help sustainability and all of this. But how could that happen when if you were a low income place, you didn't have a track record or an infrastructure or matching funds? You didn't have that. So how could you do that? And she said to me that that sometimes is the downside of funding, is that it sounds like it could work, but maybe it's not the right flavor for every organization. So I thought about that statement and how much time and effort I had already put into the proposal. I looked at what happened to the money historically, as President Nixon referred to last week, and remembered my past record trying to work with others for the benefit of the center. And I admit in the lowest ebb since taking the position at the center, I decided I had been kicked hard enough in the face enough times that I'd had enough. And with only my conclusion to write, I decided not to submit my proposal. And then we had Juneteenth. I spent some quality time with Dr. James Baugh and Sadiqa White, and they set me straight on what we had been able to accomplish and what the future could hold for our children and for the others that we served. And they demanded of me that I submit my proposal, and when I whined to them that it was already too late, they told me that not to let that stop me because the timing had nothing to do with whether or not the center is worthy of funding or whether our programs could benefit the people that we serve. We received donations from the United Way in Toledo and as far away as Denver, Colorado. The prisoners at Toledo Corrections and the ones right over there on Northwest Street are struggling all the time to figure out ways that they can help us with funding. Our board is stronger, our commitment is unyielding, and the programming that we offer, I say, can go head to head with any programming offered anywhere in this city. And we are operating on less money than any of your salaries. Last week, I listened to the reasoning for the historically acceptable allocations, a loan program for low to moderate income people where they can't afford, they can't qualify for the loan because they don't have enough money to pay it back. So how can you make that work? New Home Lima, who can't sell the homes already built because low to moderate income people can't meet the requirements for the credit scores, have a cosigner, and meet the income levels. So how can that program help others? And I don't believe all the counseling in the world, budget, credit, anything is going to help you unless you have a way of making more money. When we housed the homeless last winter, we did it because it made sense to us. Everybody else had closed their doors. Ronnie Sherrills is our chef at the center, and he and I spent a total of 7 days around the clock caring for the frozen and forgotten people in Lima and reaching out to agencies to help them get the resources they needed to survive. We made a difference in the lives we touch, and we could do more if the funds were available, because there are only so many of us willing to work around the clock knowing there's no check at the end of the week. The 5-year plan for the city says the idea is to strengthen those of us with the fewest resources and give them the support they need to give us a chance to claw our way out of poverty. And so I'm asking Lima City Council to include the request of the Cheryl Allen Southside Community Center in its allocation process for the CDBG funding for 2014-2015. Thank you.
Is there anybody else in the audience that would like to speak to the 2014-2015 CDBG allocations? Soto?
Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to provide council and members of the public some information, which we have shared with council, regarding the applications and allocations. After last meeting, I contacted HUD for continued clarification on some issues. The first and primary issue was about the acceptance or modification of applications after the deadline. I provided to council and will provide to the public, if they are interested, a copy of the response that we received from HUD regarding this issue. Basically, and I can read this if you'd like, I sent this to Mr. Richard Hendershot, who is our representative with HUD in Columbus. And I stated there were questions about accepting modifications or additional information regarding CDBG or home applicants after the application deadline has passed. This was referred to HUD. Attached was the following response from HUD. 3 questions were posed. Due to the need to complete and submit the 14-15 annual plan to HUD by July 31 to allow HUD review before final HUD deadline, reopening the application process would require reopening the public hearing process. Mandatory publication of notice and public review periods could not be completed by July 31. Missing the HUD deadline would mean loss of our 14-15 home allocation, CDB and home allocation. 2, accepting applications and major modifications to applications after the published closing of the proposed deadlines would reopen the application process to all applicants. Question 3, the City of Lima has established an application procedure acceptable to HUD. Due to publication of the meeting schedule, which included an application briefing and application deadline, no new materials or applications may be accepted, and the application deadline may stand as stated. These were the questions posed. The response from Mr. Hendershot was, Amy, this is in response to your request for confirmation on the procedures that the city has developed, implemented for its organizations to apply for HUD, or CDBG, and home funds. Based on the information you provided, and specifically in reference to the 3 issues you have described, I am confirming that the city's procedures are acceptable. So in summary, the application process is to remain closed as published in the CDBG hearing schedule. Accepting additional financial information from Jose's and Sons would reopen the entire application process and require a new public hearing period. We cannot meet the plan submission deadline if that is to occur. Therefore, the Jose and Son remains unqualified for funding, as insufficient financial documentation was provided with the application. Also, the application submitted by email on June 25th by the Cheryl Allen Center will not be accepted, as it was submitted after the deadline. So I needed to share that information with you. Secondly, there was a question about the Bradfield application, and I sent them the expense and budget. And again, I have shared this with council members and will share this with the public. The question sent to HUD was requesting confirmation on the CDB funding eligibility of senior recreational and social events budget item and within the timeline and budget submitted by Bradfield Center as part of their CDB application for funding. The proposal is for a senior health and wellness program for low to moderate income adults over 65 years of age. As described, the cost item is for senior recreational social events such as educational luncheons, health fairs, informational seminars, game nights, ice cream socials, holiday events, etc. Bradfield Center is a nonprofit institution in Lima. The OMB circular, which is the Office of Management and Budget item, Circular A-122, Attachment B, states in Item 14, entertainment costs, costs of entertainment including amusement, diversion, and social activities, and any costs directly associated with such costs, such as tickets to shows, sporting events, meals, lodging, rentals, transportation, and gratuities, are unallowable. My question to HUD was, please confirm that this is the correct cost eligibility principle to reference, and this would not be an allowable cost under CDBG. If I am incorrect in this interpretation, your help in correction is appreciated. The response from HUD was, Amy, and this was from Julie Goodrich, who is also our community rep. Amy, you are correct. Those costs are considered entertainment costs and are not eligible per OMB A-122 Attachment B. Now, what that means is the application is still eligible because it was received on time with all full financial information. However, that one item would not be eligible. Their request was for $37,852.50. We would need to remove or exclude $5,800. So therefore, for council's consideration, the amount that they may consider is $32,052.50. So that's the information I just wanted to pass along and make clear. Thank you.
Mr. President?
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Questions for Amy, or?
No. Oh, you got something to say.
My name is Maxine Dillard. I've been home at 1420 Cedar Street. I've been home 1 year. I've been all over working with FORD. And I used to brag about Lima. Lima cared about its people. If you go to Lima, they'll look out for you. They'll take care of you. That's the Lima I grew up in. But I'm ashamed of y'all. I'm ashamed of you. You knew this money was meant for the people that was less fortunate. You are their representatives. You're supposed to make sure they know how to get that money. That's your job. I'm ashamed of you. I'm ashamed of you. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. All right, want to make sure everybody's awake now. All right. My name is Maria Williams. I'm a resident at, did I turn this on? It's on.
It's on.
Okay. I'm a resident at 1215 Freeman Avenue, Lima, Ohio. Again, I'm representing my people, and it's not just Lima, but Ohio, United States, and as we've celebrated over this holiday, the 4th, and our freedoms. I wanted to first address the upcoming news that Ms. Odom decided to share the last minute about us not providing our financial records. I would like to state openly for the record that when we provided on your application for these funds, it says that the applicant must provide either or a 990N, which is an income tax or federal tax return for the organization, or 2 years of budget or whatever. May you clarify that for me, Ms. Odom? What was the, either a 990N or what was the other part of the application?
I'll run up and get the application.
Okay. But at the time when we submitted, the application was complete. and what you have in your hands is complete and met the deadline. So whatever loop-de-loop she want to put in, I'm sorry, but I have to be frank, very frank. We provided our 990N, which under IRS law states that an nonprofit organization who does not gross under 50,000 answers 5 questions and submits a receipt, and that's their IRS return. We provided that documentation to you with the application, and which met that satisfactory part of the application. Now, Ms. Odom personally invited us to submit further documentation. So for now all of a sudden, it's disqualifying us because it wasn't within the deadline, but you asked for it. The Director of Community Development asked for it for your consideration. And not only were you misinformed, first of all, that we were a for-profit organization, to disqualify us off a rip. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but it's been 50 years since 1964. And it don't seem to me like there's equal opportunity, Mayor. And while your administration, CDBG administrators, can readjust the 20% that they get, that's never been a change in that. Every year, CDBG administrators, and I want to know who those people are. I'm pretty sure Ms. Odom is one of those people that already gets a salary. You know, these funds aren't meant. If you have people asking for help, yet you want to take it all for yourself, knowing that you have the capability to decrease that percentage, yet you still take it when others are lacking? That don't seem fair to me. That don't seem like equal opportunity to me. And for you, Chief, while you receive your funds every year, the policing, how many unsolved crimes are here in Lima? How many homicides have we had this year? How much crime prevention are you really doing with these $50,000 and $60,000 and $70,000? I mean, you guys
Ma'am.
are steady getting this
Ma'am.
money. No,
No, I'm running the meeting, and I'm going to call it to order, okay? I
Okay,
appreciate
but
your concerns, but
those
the
are
issue we're
direct
discussing
concerns, sir.
right now.
These are
no.
about the allocations of
Talk
where
about
you're
the
putting the
CDBG
funds. Yes,
allocations,
and
please,
this is
okay?
where
This
you
is
guys
not
have
where
been
you stand
continually
and take
putting
shots
them.
at everybody else.
But it's where the money's been going,
What-
President. And yet
Make
you're
your
not seeing
request.
results with these fundings.
Make your request regarding
Okay, well, my
CDBG.
request is that
allocation,
you
please.
strike what Ms. Odom just said about our Jose and Sons Recycling Incorporated's application not being complete and within the deadline, not only because we did provide the 990N at the time of application, and we also provided the financial statements, as also you guys, and I want to thank Councilman Tebben for coming out personally, and Ms. Adams and Mr. Glenn for seeing what we do firsthand. And you guys asked us to provide you with estimates for the equipment that we requested that is in line with Title 24 as a solid waste district facility. And I also want to partake upon you signatures of Lima residents that signed their name in support of Jose and Sons Recycling and those that were left out to receive monies, their tax dollars. And I pray that you will take heart. You know, I'm not here to, I mean, this is freedom of speech. This is an opportunity for you as councilmen to see the true struggle and know that you guys everybody can get their fair share. So I'm asking that Jose and Sons Recycling Incorporated receive $32,000 for the purchase of any of these forklifts that we have right here. And I would like to respectfully submit those to you. And I would also like for you to readjust the CDBG administration 20% so that everybody can get what they ask for. And if that's in the spirit of equal opportunity, please grab a hold onto that. And I don't know how much louder we can be. Everybody that's up here has been saying we need help. How can we do it? How can we do our jobs if we don't have the tools that we need? And the federal government knows this. And that's why they sent y'all this money to give to the organizations that are serving the people. And I do not believe it's fair for your administration to take 20% every year when other applicants go unfunded. And you guys really need to take a look at that. Turning a blind eye is not going to help this city. And I'm not saying I'm against you. I'm here because I care. I'm here because I love my country, I love God, and I love my people, and I want to make a difference. So, again, I would like to humbly present this to you, Mr. President, if you could share this. Thank you.
Yep.
And again, I invite everyone and the public to please come to Jose and Sons Recycling Incorporated, and let's be on a unified effort to make our planet and our future a better place. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to speak to the issue of the 2014-2015 CDBG allocations? Please come forward and state your name and address. Is there anybody else in the audience that would like to speak to the issue of the 2014-2015 funding allocations for CDBG funding? Sir.
How you doing?
Good.
Council, Mayor, and others. My name is Les Henderson. I live at 729 South Union, and I'm here to speak on about the CDBG fund and how it's being funded. And we've heard a lot of people just leave here talking about how we need the help, and I hope you folks take that into consideration. Take it into consideration. These people are, and we all are, serious. We want to help. We want to have the tools to work with to help. And you folks hold the tools. Please share them. Thank you.
Mr. President,
Ms. Adams.
I appreciate everyone's opinion this evening. To Ms. Vicki Sherrill, my comment on those not attending those training and informative meetings that Counselor and Chairman Glenn held in this process was directed only at the 3 that were on the list. That was not including you because you were at every one. And I was shocked not to see Cheryl Allen on this list when we got this. I'm like, she came to everything. Why isn't this on? You know, if it had received 0 then, we would have had the discussion 2 weeks ago on funding, okay? So my comment was directed at those agencies that were on the list, not you. And Mr. President, I'm looking at this estimate from Jose and Sons. There's one here with various sizes, load capacities, and various different costs. And the low is $17,950. And then you have the one that's the $31,500. So I'm gonna pass this around, but I just wanted to make, you have a range between what you've requested and the low, so I just wanted to make that known. Thank you.
And we did our best, if I may just interject, to acquire someone here locally, as locally we could, to keep those funds here simulated. So again, we're flexible, and anything that can help continue the operation is better than what we have now. And it will, again, seed into the future, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Ms. Adams.
Mr. President,
Mr. Glenn?
I just have a couple of things there. I appreciate, first of all, I want to let everyone know, but Vicki did show up for all the meetings. And like Ms. Adams said, we was looking for the application, we didn't get to see it. And I can toot my horn though, because I know the work they do down there. I know all the work they do. I know when she go, they're without pay. And sometimes I just feel sorry for her, like how does she do this and keep everything going in the center? And, it's hurt. When we didn't see it, we always talk about where it was at. But the thing about it though, we're looking at this guy, Richard Parson from the program manager down in HUD. He the one doing the disapproval of them. He calling the shots. But then I've been try to call him today and leave him a message to see what direction we can take this. Because we know a lot of folks need the money. And Vicki, you did a great job on that proposal. I looked it over when I was in a mail walk this past week. I was looking it over. Super job. And, and I know Jose now, they try hard. They working very hard trying to make a difference in the community. The money earmarked, like Miss Maxine say, yes, it's earmarked, and I can toot this horn all day long. One for the 5th and 6th ward, you want to get a dime. Okay? And no one can tell me different. No one can tell me different, because I've already checked it out. We are urban development. There people will say, well, it's got turned in late. There's a lot of different things that we had to do. Them centers had to run without assistant directors, had to run without secretaries. One person had to run a lot of things. And a lot of people don't know that. They know it, but they don't feel it because they have all them peoples in place. When you got board members trying to play the role as a counselor. Everybody playing roles in there, trying to do something, make a difference, and different things like that. Do we look at that? Do we look at that? We always want, when it comes down to it, we got to go by the rule book. We always going to do that. We don't look what the people have done to our community peoples in Lima. And a lot of people's souls were saved when they went to Jose, when they went to Sher Island Center, went to Bradford Center. Their souls were saved. The people were froze to death. These are some people paying taxes now in our city. They're paying our salaries. There's a lot of things, And I don't understand what Richard is doing there. And I'm making phone calls to see how could we do that. We can't overrule him and say, put this in there because he say he's going to disapprove all of it. He's the man with the money. He's the man who's striking the numbers here. He's saying this is the way it's going to be. When he sent us the email saying that he's going to disapprove this, and it's not fair. It's not fair at all. When I got this email, I didn't like it at all because it's hurting our community bad. It's hurting our pioneers who trying to help them folks who's not working. It's helping our folks who's not working a job. It's hurting the folks who doesn't have a car to go to work in, who don't have food. When you hurt these community centers like that, and most people say, well, we should have got it turned in. I can answer that too. Because a lot of people's asking me, why are you talking, dearie? She should have got it turned in. I understand that too. But I've been here long enough. There's a will, there's a way. And I've seen things change around overnight. But these things don't change around overnight because this is not one of their home run hits. Okay? It was a home run hit. And I'm going to say it like that. I dare anybody challenge me on that. I've been saying that from day one. I'm not afraid to say that. If it's one of the ones, I'm going to say it. Because it irks me, And we're doing a lot of work. We're doing a lot of things trying to make this community a better place. We got to come better in this. We got to come better to make our community a better place. We had death, and we still not waking up, and we pointing fingers. We just got to continue working together, you know, and people know what the work all these community centers doing. Yes, sometimes you don't have a director at Bradford Center. You got people who care, who try to do the paperwork the best they can to keep that historian center open. Okay, they're doing the best they can trying to keep it open. When you got the board running the center, because they can't afford no director. You know, is I'm trying to find an easy way out? No, because all of us know one another here. All of us know one another here. All of us know one another what we do in this community. All of us know how we love the folks, how we try to help each other out. All of us know that, you know, but we don't. And I know Vicki been working, trying to get money. I was on the board and seen her beg for money from everybody. I seen time the gas is going off when the board has to ante up the money to keep them babies in there. But I'm saying these are some of the things that these centers do. The same with Bradford Center. I seen how they working hard, Jose and them trying to work hard and help people out. People come there trying to just have some money to get food with. You know, just, if you guys got to see these things, and that's what hurt me so bad, that how could I pull the trigger and find something out to do something different to help this when the guy in Columbus saying, oh, I'm not going to prove this. How could he, he don't know what you guys are doing. He's going by what hearsay. I'm done, Mr. President.
All right, thank you, Mr. Glenn. Is there anybody else?
Mr. President?
Mr. McLean?
You know, I've looked over this and I've been kind of quiet during this whole thing, and I've got a couple of questions. And I know that Bradfield Center, I do know that Cheryl Allen Center has gone through and worked with the United Way trying to become a grant specialist. Am I correct? Have you done that? Well, I guess one of the companies on here that's looking for funds is the United Way. And the reason they want the funds is to become grant specialists. They're teaching you how to go out and get grants. The idea behind that is just no different than if you teach a man to fish, he'll have some food. So if that's the case and they're successful at doing that, I think that that's something that a lot of these community centers should get in the middle of and see why those grants and where they're at. Maybe not from the CBDG, but from other places. There are monies available out there if the grant's submitted, and I just wish that we could fund that to give them some money to continue that United Way, simply because I feel that if you're teaching them how to do this, you'll come back and continue to get money from other places. Maybe this well isn't the right one. If we're not able to do this because of, you know, the state saying this is not, we can't, you know, increase the applications or open the applications or can't accept any of the other funding, maybe the United Way is something we ought to look at a little more seriously here tonight. Allow them a little more of their funds that they need for that community grant writing specialist. Now, that's my opinion. I think that if we're not able to do Jose and Son recycling, we've talked about doing some of that money. We could shift it over to the United Way, which they said last year it was going to take a couple good years. They have provided us with some information on, if you look down that information list, there's a lot of centers, a lot of people that are nonprofits that are looking for money. And they are trying to figure out a way to get it just like everyone else is. And I think with the United Way, they're giving them a roadmap. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. You can come forward, Mr. Earl, Jess.
Mr. McLean, I understand exactly why you feel the way that you do, but it's not so much about learning to write a grant, because part of what happens when you write, because I can write a grant. I am certified to write grants, so I don't need to go to the United Way to learn how to write a grant. I know how to write a grant. You've seen my grant. And the United Way has funds that they could support others, but there are criteria that they're setting that leave out a certain segment due to the past or whatever reason that they've chosen. There are ways for us to proceed and to actually benefit the actual people that need it the most. It's just like saying, we'll give you a loan for your house, well, you can't really pay it back. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna give you counseling so that if you can ever find anybody that will give you the money, then, so I'm gonna give the money to someone who already has a great job, and I'm gonna add more money to their job so that they can talk to you about the fact that you're never gonna get a loan. So until we start putting money into the places where the people actually benefit from every dollar that you give them, you're always gonna have the same issue going on. We're helping people every day without a dime. I have not had a check in 18 months.
Vicki, I'm not arguing that point with you either.
But what I'm saying to you, and I know you're not arguing with
What
me.
I'm trying to explain is that if this is not gonna work for you tonight, maybe that's an alternative for you. Maybe there are funding, once we get some of these grants starting to circulate throughout Lima, that might become more available to us. Not only to us, when I
I
say us,
understand.
I'm including the people of Lima, not just you, not just me, not people of my ward, the whole city of Lima. That's what I'm interested in.
And I understand, but I say that the money that you have is better spent towards someone that has nothing than someone who already has a pool of money to benefit from.
I don't disagree with that.
Mr. President,
Mr. Lowe?
thank you. I've been kind of quiet. I want to know if Ms. Odom would come forward again. And I seen she went upstairs to, okay, she went upstairs to get some paperwork. Can you say what you was going to say before I make my comment? Did you went upstairs to answer a question from Ms. Williams?
The application is posted on our website, and we also had an application briefing at the request of Mr. Glenn to go over all of the elements of the application. The application is fairly lengthy. I don't want to take this entire book apart, but you'll see that there's a lot of information, but the actual physical pieces that you fill out are only a few pages long, plus some directions on your scope of work. In talking about the requirements of the application, which we stressed again really needed to be fully completed with its submission, there is a portion that says basic outline and contents of scope of work. It talks about all the different items that you need to do under organization of work. It talks about work plan, area selection, client selection, application of relevant rules, laws, project administration, workflow, how that's going to happen, accounting and records keeping. Provide a brief statement of your accounting, billing, procedures, and record keeping system. It also then goes on about project reporting, quarterly finance reporting. It then talks about timelines and budgets. It then goes on about organizational capacity and talks about include the organization's balance sheet and financial statement for last 2 years or IRS Form 990 for last 2 years. Attach corporate roster. For clarification, when I spoke with Ms. Williams, we have a single form which was a 990 form. It had no financial information other than basically that they had qualified with this 990 with the IRS. In speaking with her, it has always been our assumption that when someone provides a 990, there is financial information. The 990 itself tells you really nothing. There is usually an attachment that has additional financial information. Lacking that, we were not able to make a full review of the qualification.
Okay.
Okay, that answers the question?
Okay. I'm going to make a statement.
Yeah.
Hold on 1 second. I actually want to address Ms. Maxine first. I kind of find your statement a little insulting. But hold on, because I didn't interrupt you. The bottom line is you have no clue how much time, and I can't speak for the rest of them. I personally have called this lady right here, Ms. Odom, asked for copies of grants, asked for paperwork. She has supplied it every single time. I have taken it to individuals. I have given it to them time and time again. Now, in saying that, I have gotten calls 2 hours prior to things supposed to be turned in, and they say, what time we supposed to have this in? Now, I'm gonna be blunt. The money out there is for us. Is there money out there? Lots. We, myself inclusive, have to start doing business the way business is meant to be. You cannot wait to the last minute and say, you know what, right now I think we need to go ahead and back up and please let us in, or please let us do this and let us do that. If you keep coming to the well and you know there ain't no water in it, you go find another well, dig another hole. And I've been telling, not to throw names out there, but I've been telling certain organizations, some of them not even on this list, it's time for us, the individuals that this money is meant for, it's up to us to get on our game. We're sitting up here pointing fingers, and all I keep hearing all night and is woe is me, and this happened, but this didn't happen. This happened, but this didn't happen. This happened, but this didn't happen. You know what? Sometimes you have to encourage yourself to move forward and find a different source. At the end of the day, when I'm looking at these numbers, you're not asking for much. But if you're not asking for much, do a little work. Do the work, have the stuff in on time. Hold on, when it's supposed to be on time. And we're not doing it. Now, I'm going to tell you something, and she might get upset. There's a situation right now. Ms. Odom honestly has held her peace not to front some people out tonight because the numbers aren't there. Now, she could have got up here and just been dogmatic. She didn't do it. And we don't see eye to eye hardly ever. Okay?
You're too tall.
But I'm too tall. I'll just say, I'm telling you right now, it's time. If you are a business, get your business together. Quit waiting to the last minute. Submit the stuff right. Mr. Glenn fought for her to get these classes and do. And to be honest, she didn't have to do it. All she had to do was say no. She set it up. He set it up. He said, "This is what I want." The help has been there all along. When I tell you I have been out and said, here's the grant, here's the application, do this, do that, do this, and then I come in and she looks me in the eye or somebody else looks me in the eye and says, I ain't do it. I just throw my hands up. I'm going to keep doing my job. So to say that you're disappointed we ain't doing our job, that's a flat out lie. And anybody in my ward can tell you, hold on, man, that's a flat out lie. Because if I don't do anything, I work for my constituents. So I'm done with that comment you said. Back to business, though. If you want it, go get it. If you want it, go get it. Stop coming through the city if you know the city is going to keep doing this.
That's what we did.
Okay, listen. Miss Maria made a comment that administrator is getting paid this, that, and the other. I dare you to check my record on how I vote on CDBG. I dare you. Because I'm sitting there, I feel what you, hold on.
It should be unanimous.
Dude, listen,
We're not
listen
going
to
to
me.
argue back
Listen
and
to
forth.
me.
Mr.
Listen.
Lowe has the floor.
Listen to me. There's 8 individuals up here. Okay, now I'm going to say this. Just like she made the statement, if you want to hold us accountable, put yourself in a position to have a little say-so. That's what I had to do. I put myself in a position so I can talk about these issues, so I can try to make a change. It's 4 years in, well, 4.5 years in now, and I'm still learning. But you have to put yourself in a position. You either going to complain or do what you're supposed to do. And I had to do what I had to do to get in this position, to make change. And is it fast? No. This ain't no overnight ordeal. It's sometimes in here, we're slugging it out back there that y'all don't have a clue about. And we come out here and smile. Okay? So watch. Be cognizant of what you say before you say it. Because you really need to know what's really going on. Okay? But again, Mr. President, if I don't leave with nothing said tonight, get your stuff together, and then we don't have to go through this. Be on point, be on time, have your stuff addressed right. And again, she did not have to do the classes. Y'all need to be thanking Mr. Glenn. He did it. That's all I got to say.
Mr.
Thank you,
President,
Mr. Lowe. Mr. Tevin?
what I've heard this evening, there's $370,000 that we have divvied up to some degree. there's an adjustment that needs to be made to the Bradfield number of 5,800. I'm not willing to jeopardize the $1,370,000 over this discussion.
Correct.
Okay, I'm not going to penalize the rest of the community and the other activities that are funded by these funds by reopening the process. If we've got an email from HUD saying we can't do it, I don't know why we're talking about it. I think that my suggestion is that the items that didn't get funded this year, we can look at how do we start. It sounds like what Derry Glenn did in requesting the training, that it wasn't fully taken advantage of. I don't know if starting earlier would help us or not. If people aren't going to take advantage of it.
Some did.
Some did, some didn't. But we're going to end up with some things that don't get funded. I do agree with Mr. McLean's comment. Last hearing, we moved some money, made some money available in case we were going to fund these things. So there is money to fund the grant writing effort of the United Way. There is money to fund the Bradfield Center minus the $5,800. And I think that's where our focus should be so we can move forward with this. I will not support jeopardizing the $1,370,000 for the rest of the community over this discussion. We can have the discussion. We will have two organizations who aren't going to be happy at the end of the day. And I think that when you're trying to divide this kind of a pot up, that's really not a bad track record. But if we want to change the strategy for the city moving forward, those discussions have to start taking place as soon as this closes out and we're talking about next year's allocation.
Be on point.
That's when those discussions have to take place, not when we're in the public hearing phase of this program. Thank you.
Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Tevin. Ms. Tillard.
I beg to differ. The Cheryl Allen Center did do the work. We did the work. We came to the meeting. And Ms. Odom told her not to submit it because she wasn't going to get the money. So, misinformed. And as far as work, I would love to invite you all to the Cheryl Allen Center and just spend a day with us. One day. Give me 1 day of your time. I go there at 7:30 in the morning. I leave sometimes at 9, 10, and 12 o'clock at night. I do the work. Maybe you call it this work, but there's more kinds of work. And yes, I am ashamed. Oh.
Great. Is there anybody else on council that has anything to say?
Mr. President,
Ms. Adams?
I appreciate what Councilor Tebben just said. I'd mentioned earlier about LACNIP with the reduction in Bradfield of the 5,800, and the conversation I had with Amy on Friday in getting a hold of the applicant submittal, Connie Miller, who's the treasurer of LACNIP, and she took it to the executive board of LACNIP if they would be accepting to amend their application to receive portable air conditioners up to $1,000. And Connie Miller's here this evening. I did get a text from her that the majority of the executive board agreed to this. I don't know if I need to make this into a motion,
Well,
you know.
we're under discussion.
Yeah.
I have a question that I need either Amy or the law director to answer, and that is, does that change in request constitute and require reopening the entire request process?
Mr. President, a modification to a timely request, meaning this is their base, they have all the information. Now, a modification to an eligible and qualified request is not a reopening? So if they are actually reducing their request, that's not a problem. It's only if it goes up, or if it doesn't have the appropriate information provided at the time of application.
Okay.
If I may, Mr. President, I want to remind council, there was a lot of discussion at the last meeting, and where we left it, there was what you have is exactly the same sheet you had at the last meeting, because at the end of the meeting, you had determined that you wished to table the discussion for tonight. So there was not any movement of any funds. There was discussion about taking the salary of a property maintenance inspector, which I verified with the finance department. If you would take you could take the salary of the PMC2, which would be with salary and benefits, would be $70,418. I believe that was the proposal. I think what we had estimated at about 60, but going back and looking at all the benefits, the total amount covered by CDBG is $73,418. The recommendation was to move that out, have that paid for with general fund, and then use that to fund other CDBG items. But that was not moved because everything was tabled. But I think that's what you're referring to about making some funds available. So at this time, there are no funds yet allocated for Bradfield, nor LACNIP, and nor Jose and Sons. So what you see here is you need to look at the total on line 5. And by the way, for those in the, there are some more of these forms. We handed them out at the last meeting. There's some at the back there. There should be a few. The lovely lady from WLAO has some in her hand if you would like another copy. So I would appreciate directing your attention basically to those totals, that line 5 showing what the allocations were, and letting me know your pleasure from there. Thank you.
Mr. President.
Thank you.
Ms.
Mr.
Odom,
Geiger.
LACNIP's original application, did that include funds for air conditioning?
It was an application for air conditioning,
Okay.
correct.
Thank you.
What they were asking for was whole building,
Gotcha.
and what, the whole building. And the modification is, Ms. Adams is suggesting is that they get window air conditioners instead.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. President,
Well, were you done, Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Okay.
Right now.
Mrs. Miles?
Just clarification, the 73, Ms. Amy, that is for the property maintenance, which includes salary plus benefits. We had talked about a portion of it coming out of general fund and the remainder coming out of CDBG.
You tell me, because
Okay.
there were several different variations on that by
Say
the
that
end of the
again.
meeting. It was tabled. So just tell me what your pleasure is.
I thought we discussed previously taking a portion of it out of general fund and a portion out of CD. Was that
Of
not
the
correct?
property
For
maintenance?
the property maintenance,
Okay.
salary and benefits for
No.
interest.
Right now, Randy, correct me if I'm wrong, as I recall the conversation at the last meeting, there are 2 property maintenance inspectors that are funded out of CDBG. We were looking at taking a portion up to the full amount of whatever we allocate from one of the positions, okay? And reallocating it to, at the last meeting, we were talking about Bradfield Center, and Jose and Sons, and we would reduce the allocation in the CDBG for the property, one of the property maintenance inspector positions by an associated amount, okay? That's what I understood, okay? And there was some discussion as to whether it was salary and benefits were 64, 68, 72, whatever, okay? So,
So with that in mind, we were saying that Bradfield, we're gonna reduce the original submittal by $5,000. I'm just using round numbers, $32,000. And if we're gonna give the LACNIF, and I believe Mrs. Adams is requesting $1,000 for air conditioners,
Right.
$33,000. Would we still have room, since we are saying that Jose and Sons, who we originally talked about funding, is no longer eligible? Could we include United Way in there? Bottom line would basically be the same as what we discussed before.
Well,
A little
Would be
less,
less,
a little
less.
less.
the answer to your question is, yes, you could. The ultimate answer is, what will council support?
Okay, that's what
So
I'm putting this
it's-
out as
yeah.
a suggestion. I think we need to move on, otherwise
Okay,
we're gonna be
so-
stuck here.
Are you
for a while.
making a motion, Mrs.
Okay,
Miles? I'm just
all right.
gonna-
I make a motion that we fund Bradford Center.
At 32,000?
They're at 32, 1,000 for LACNIF, and include the 27.5 for United Way. And that will get us up to about $60,000.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor, and that is to fund United Way at 27.5, LACNIP at 1,000, Bradfield Center at 32,000. Okay? And that comes up to $60,500.
Mr. President?
Okay, so that's, was there a second?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, the motion, the second, is on the floor. I'll open that up for discussion on the motion.
Mr.
Ms.
President?
Adams.
I think the conversation along the way was going to what Counselor Miles just made a motion to. I'm objecting to her motion because she sits on the board of United Way.
Okay, I can disqualify myself. Okay.
Okay. Let me, so we'll withdraw the motion.
Okay.
Okay? To move the discussion forward, I'll make the motion that we fund Bradfield at 32,000, LACNIP at 1,000, United Way at 27.5. I'll ask for a second. Let's open that up for discussion, and I'm going to go through this point by point. Bradfield Center, are we in concurrence that 32,000 is an acceptable allocation by all of council? I'm not going to split the hairs over the $563 or whatever it is, okay? $852.
It's only 52. It's only 52.
$52, okay?
Yeah.
Do we have some consensus on that allocation? Okay, do we have consensus on the LACNIP allocation
Yeah.
at 1,000? Mr. Glenn, can you give me some indication? Are you okay with that?
Yes, ma'am, I'm
Okay,
okay with that.
all right.
I was-
So the
I
issue that
understand.
remains then is the United Way allocation of $27,500. Okay? I mean, that seems to be the crux of the decision, okay? And what are your, I guess, what's council's thoughts on that?
Mr. President?
Ms. Adams?
Last year, going through this procedure, I asked that money be moved to support it. I will support it this evening as well.
Okay.
Mr. President.
Mr. Tevin?
I will support it. I think that the opportunity here is, because it will be the second year of these efforts, I think that the probability is much greater that we will realize additional money coming into the community from this expenditure. So I will support that.
Okay. Is there anybody else?
Mr. President,
Mr. Lowe?
I would like to call Mr. Phil up front, if I could, from United Way.
Mr. Haynes?
If this is supported, would this relieve you of any other funds that would be able to help the Sherrill Island Center?
Would this relieve me of any other?
Would you be able, would any other funds be going to the Sherrill Island Center?
Well, at this point, the,
Yes or no?
no, it won't, it would not.
Thank you. Oh, one more question. I do have one more question, Mr. President. This specialist that came in last year, how much was she able to bring that we funded for last year? How much money did she actually bring into the community?
We probably got about $50,000 so far. Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Haynes, before you, I want to follow up on that. You're saying that, well, no, there's been a question, okay, as to what the return on this investment has been. You're saying that there has been $50,000 in grants brought about as a result of that investment last year?
Correct.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure,
On top
because
of
that
it.
was information that I know we talked about last year. I'm not sure if there's been the reporting to council that we had asked for, okay? But I'm going to make it clear that my expectation is that if this is approved, that there be at least quarterly reports of grants sought and grants awarded, so that we know what's happening with the taxpayers' money.
Sure.
Okay? It's very hard to defend this, and I had heartburn about supporting it last year, but it was out of the box, it was something worth trying. And I'm sitting here now looking at it tonight, and still not sure if I've gotten a full reporting of, I mean, this is the first time I've heard the $50,000 number. Phil, that's terrible. We deserve better. The taxpayers deserve better. Okay? So going forward, I guess that's the message. If this is approved, there needs to be some reporting to council.
Sorry.
Okay?
You have my word on it.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Phil. Mr. President, I got
Mr. Lowe?
one more question also. This is concerning career pathway. If the gentleman would come up. I brought this up, and I know he thinks that I'm always beating on him, but I brought this up last time. If this is approved, he'll get $7,000, and I believe the number you gave me was $6,100 in administrative.
It's about 6,500.
Okay, 65. And you meet how many times?
We'll have 6 classes total. One's complimentary, 5 that are actually grant funded. I'll teach one at no cost to the grant.
So about $1,075 per class. I've asked several times. The individual that's going in the door, I know when it first starts, there's almost 20-some people there. By the end of the class, I can't hear.
Excuse me.
I can't hear. At the end of the class, there's about maybe 6. I keep asking year after year, how many of these individuals are taking money out of CDBG to get taught, and how many are remaining in Lima actually working in our workforce? And I still to this day have not received a complete answer. 4 years.
Well, under the confidentiality laws, what we can do is give you the composite information, and composite information indicates that 85% of these students will be unemployed, and we get 50 to 60% getting jobs, or they're pursuing additional training at Road State, Apollo Career Center, or another area school toward a better job. And we take some conservative estimates. We just take a small sample, and based on that small sample, we do some calculating and indicate that the city income tax is paid by Lima City residents, returns about $12,000 out of that $7,000 investment.
Why can't we get that on paper? Like,
And
why
it's
are
in
we-
the scope of work.
Say again, Ms. Odom.
It's in the application they provided.
Okay, if it's
And
in the
I could-
application, I'm still, I've been asking for 4 years.
Well, and regarding the enrollments, we cap our enrollments in this class at 15 because of the number of computers in the labs, whether it be at Road State, Bradfield Center, LACA, wherever we hold the classes. So we had 12 to 15 if we have a full class. Typically, what we do is we'll go to things like the Open Gate. We network with the Job and Family Services, community-based organizations all around the area, and we promote this. And I'll typically get 20 to 25 people phoning in saying, I want to take this class. And then 2 business days before the class begins, I will call for confirmation. And I will have typically 12, 15, maybe a couple more. And then right out of the gate off the first day, you'll have maybe about 5 people who don't show up. I'll make attempts to call them back. And if I do get, if I am successful in contacting the people who don't show up on the first day, rarely will they start coming. They'll have an excuse, I had a family emergency, health issue, something.
And this isn't against
I'm
your
just
teaching
trying to address
skills.
what the low numbers
I understand. This isn't against your teaching skills, but I have deliberately took myself into the Bradfield Center. You held classes on Tuesday nights. I know the first couple of nights there was a few people in there, and within 2 weeks, 3 weeks, there wasn't nobody in there. And what I'm saying is, we're handing you $7,000 for 6 classes, for 6 weeks. I just,
Well, in the Bradfield Center last year, we had a total of 13 enroll, 10 from the city of Lima enrolled, and 6 completed certification.
Okay, I don't even know how to make this number plain. It's Lima money. I just want to know how many people, when they get done, are actually working in the city of Lima once these taxpayers have paid for this class.
But the only barometer you have
Then they
is
need
right
to make
there.
it tighter. They need to make it tighter.
Well, I've got the list.
I understand what you're saying, John.
But I guess what I'm saying is, Jesse, I mean, as long as we've been doing this, maybe you save for the first year, the income tax generated has exceeded the $7,000 we've put into the
How can
program.
you show me that and you don't understand? How can you give me that number?
Because
you
there
don't
have been
understand?
reports that have come through stating how many have been Lima residents that have gone through the course.
The Lima residents who have responded, I do have on page 6, the manufacturer employment. There are non-manufacturing employment for students who complete the program as well. But we have had Lima City residents obtain manufacturing employment at places, Dana Corporation, all the way down to Heat Treating Technologies, Rudolph Foods, a number of different places, about 24 different manufacturers. And what I hear from the students who do get successful in getting an application and an interview for the job, if they don't get the job, what they do tell me, if I do have success in getting feedback from them, they said, the math that you taught in that class was just like what they taught or what they were testing us on at this place. I heard it from people who applied at Dana. I've heard it from Midway Products up at Columbus Grove. So we don't claim to be the silver bullet that's going to guarantee you the job. But if you take advantage of this program when it's offered, finish the class, get the certification, every week we send job openings at that skill level. We're not going to tell you, you know, here's job openings for maintenance or tool and die, but we send them regularly job openings for that skill level. If you're aggressive in applying for work there, and one of the things I tell the students on the first day of the class, this job, if you get the job after this class, it's not going to be your dream job. Get your foot in the door somewhere and get that work experience. Show up every day. Don't have an issue with drugs and absenteeism. And these people will promote you from within, and then you're getting into some decent money. And if that employer isn't to your liking, then take what you learned from there and go elsewhere. And it's a journey. I don't claim that this is going to be the destination that's going to end everything.
Okay. With that being said, thank you, sir. I have been asking for a long time for some improvements to take place in our parks. And I'm going to ask that, want to make the motion that the career,
We have a motion.
There's a motion already on the floor.
I'll wait. Go ahead, I'll wait.
You can discuss what you want to discuss, but you can't make it a motion yet.
I would
Okay.
like to discuss with the council as a whole, moving the career pathway and putting that money into park improvements. If anybody would have an issue with that, because all our parks need some major help. Rick has been limited on what he's been able to do, items purchased. We've had volunteers wanting to step up, wanting to work. I think we could use that to even help in maybe summer help. We know that they're working, we see them, we'll see the improvements, and beautify the parks. If anybody wants to.
Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. Tevin.
I guess my comment, Jesse, on that would be, I mean, it's $7,000 in career pathways. When I look at what's happening relative to the economy picking up and manufacturing jobs on the increase, it's going to be, what ends up happening is places like Ford and Dana, I mean, they'll get the cream of the crop will go to those places because that's where the best opportunity for money is. They'll go to the big one, but there are smaller companies that are going to lose people that need to backfill them, and they need them to come in with a certain skill set. And that $7,000 to me is an investment in ensuring that we have some kind of a feeder system to help support these smaller manufacturers with these people. So Although I'd love to see the parks get more money, I think that taking it from there would not be the right move. I personally do have heartache with that.
Mr. President?
Back to the motion on the floor, Ms. Adams.
With the discussion from Counselor Lowe, you know, with the allocations of Bradfield, LACNIP, and United Way, we're looking at $60,552. Of the salary that we are suggesting to move to general fund of $73,418, that remaining difference, I would support if we can amend the motion to move that into parks, around 13,000. And leave, and not, because I won't support, you know, taking the funds away from roads, the pathway.
Mr. President, that would be a general fund move, because after the access that we need here, it meets the criteria for CBDG. That extra money would be a general fund expense, am I correct? Wouldn't it go from the general fund to pay the parks, to add it to the parks? Because if we add that 14,000 to the bottom line, it's because it's going to come from the salary of one of their techs, of the inspectors.
Right, so that extra 13,000 load is going to have to get picked up by the general fund. And by,
But the 13,000 would go to item 7, park improvements.
But
right.
wouldn't that go over
It's-
our
it's pretty much a
allotment
wash.
of CBDG money at the bottom line? Would that be the correct way to do that?
Mr. Bartels, is that right?
See if I can explain.
Mr. President,
Mr. Bartels?
we're talking, I believe, of reallocating $73,000, roughly,
Right.
out of CDBG funds. What am I not understanding, Mr. McLean?
We're actually have $60,552 coming from the CBDG allotment here that we want to approve.
By moving.
By moving one person.
Moving those funds from the salary and fringes of a property maintenance inspector.
So
And
can
moving
we
those
add the
costs.
14,000 or 13 to 14,000 into parks?
If we're going to move an entire individual's salary and fringes, Ms. Odom has stated that that number is roughly $73,000. Ms. Adams' math, I believe, is correct. You have about 13,000 left to play with if you're going to move all of those funds for that salary, that position, to the general fund. If you're not, then you just allocate 60,000 of that salary to the general fund. You've got leeway is the short answer, I guess.
Okay.
You have about 12,000 leeway. 12,866 is what I come up with. If you take the full amount of one property maintenance inspector and move it into the general fund.
Okay. Is council in agreement of wanting to put money into the parks?
Yes.
All right.
Yep.
I'm going to make it, I'll amend my motion that the Bradfield, to get rid of that $58 or whatever, they get $32,100. LACNIP 1,000, United Way 27.5, and Parks 10,000.
Second.
As part of your motion, you want to state that you're decreasing the property maintenance fund by that same amount.
Correct. And decrease the property maintenance 2 position currently funded out of CDBG by $70,600. And that's my motion.
Second.
General fund.
Yeah.
You have
We're
to
gonna
say
do-
that.
No,
You have to say that.
no. Gotta fund it somewhere.
Okay.
Is there any discussion on that motion? Mr. Geiger's thinking. Let's give him a second.
stated to include that. Do we have a second?
Yes.
Yes, Mr. McLean has a second. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Is there any discussion on the motion? Okay, I'm gonna, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries.
President,
Of course, I'm abstaining.
Just for the record. just show
I'm
this.
abstaining, yeah.
Yes. Okay. Let's do a voice call, please. Yep.
Mr. Gordon?
Get caught up.
Yes. Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Mrs. Miles?
Abstain.
And that, oh, and Mr. Nixon, I forgot
Yes.
you.
So the motion carries with a 7-0 vote with one abstention.
Mr. President.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Glenn?
I just want to make sure that Rose State, and I agree with Mr. Lowe too, and we want to see quarter reports. And you're sending it in here, you say your report's in, but you never come to the meeting and tell us about it. We've been getting a lot of reports on that. I don't have a problem, everybody feel what they doing, but I feel different. I feel that there's not I don't see a lot of people getting hired through Lima. I don't see it. I would know some of the people. I would talk to some of the people. So we need to watch that quarterly, just like we're doing everything else quarterly. We want him to come in here, not drop off no paper saying, here, this is what we're doing, and that's it. No, we want to hear from you, okay? Because we got to start watching this. And I mean, you can make it, dress it up, because it's at Rose State. You can come in here and give us numbers saying what you're doing. No one can give us no, if they're living in Lima, working in Lima, nobody can give us no information, you know, but we need to do core reports though. And I'm very, very totally against, because I don't see, out of all the years we've been doing this, I haven't seen nothing great about it yet. No one never told me the story yet, and I like to hear good stories. We haven't heard nothing for that program yet, so.
Thank you, Mr. Glenn. I take exception because Mr. Durliat has been here often,
Well,
talking about this program, and has sent reports and
Yes.
has submitted them to council. So I'm going to defend his
You can defend
integrity
him all you
on
want,
this,
Mr.
okay?
President.
Thank you, Mr. Glenn.
Thank you.
We're going to
interrupting.
recess for,
President, you need to formally close the public hearing.
good, I'll take a motion to formally close the hearing.
Motion.
Everybody
made the
like-
motion?
It's very rude in here all the
Motion
time.
the second is to
When something's
close the
right,
public hearing.
everybody get rude all the time. Don't interrupt me either, Mr. President. Don't tap
This
me.
individual to answer.
Aren't you gonna ask, has anybody got something to say about this, CDBG money like you did before?
We have made the motion to amend the allocations, and that's been voted on by council, okay? It is, the process, sir, the process of a public hearing is for the public to give their input, then council discusses and makes their motion, and that's exactly what happened, okay?
I thought I'd have an opportunity to say
No.
something else. After I heard all the discussion, I thought I was gonna have an opportunity to say something else.
No, it is not a roundtable debate. It is a public hearing.
It's a public.
The motion
debate.
and the, sir,
Not around hearing, it's a public debate.
okay. No, I'm not going to say anything. The motion and the second on the floor is to close the public hearing. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? The motion carries. We'll recess for 5-10 minutes. Public hearing for the 2015 tax budget. I'll have the clerk read the call.
Notice is hereby given that on the 7th day of July, 2014, at 7 p.m. in the Lima City Council Chambers, 50 Town Square, Lima, Ohio, a public hearing will be held upon the 2015 tax budget for the city of Lima. All interested persons desiring to speak to the budget will be given an opportunity to do so at that time. Following is a summary of the budget. General Fund, $28,985,299. Waterworks Fund, $15,313,576. Sewer Disposal Fund, $11,217,723. Garbage and Refuge Fund, $2,979,612. Guarantee water deposit, $9,679,172. Sewer improvement, $495,000. Stormwater sewer, $2,441,380. Miscellaneous funds, $26,719,745, for a total of $97,478,002. Copies of the, $2, I'm sorry. Copies of the entire budget are on file in the office of the Clerk of Council and the office of the City Auditor, Municipal Center, 50 Town Square, and will be open to public inspection during regular working hours.
With that notice, I will open the public hearing on the 2015 tax budget. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak to the issue of the 2015 tax budget? For the second call, if there's anybody in the audience that would like to speak to the 2015 tax budget, please come forward, state your name and address. For the third and final call, is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak to the 2015 tax budget? Seeing none, I'll declare the public hearing closed. And we'll move on with the privilege of the floor, Gene Drexler. Gene, before you start, I'm going to thank you for your patience. I understand that you were here, I believe, at the last meeting for a portion of it. But the public hearings that we've had to go through are processes that we've had to go through, and sometimes they take a little bit longer. Normally, the privilege of the floor is one of the first items on the agenda. So I appreciate your patience and understanding. Council rules do allow 3 minutes for privilege of the floor.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
I hope it takes me less. I hope I'm not barking up the wrong tree. Please, I need to vent. My name is Jean Drexler, and I live near the corner of Oak and Vine. On May 13, 2014, shortly after 7 a.m., my granddaughter, Anastasia Cookland, and I were walking north on Oak Street, going to her bus stop, which is on the corner of Oak at Kibbe, when we both saw 2 dogs coming at us very quickly. We tried to retreat by backstepping, but we did not make it safely back home. The darker, more aggressive dog got my left pant leg in his mouth and would not let go. I fell to the ground. My glasses fell to the ground. My right shoe came off. The lighter dog did not bite me even after being hit in the head multiple times with my right shoe. He was joining in the fun the darker dog was having. I hit both of these dogs multiple times with my shoe, but these dogs would not leave. A young boy about 10 or 12 years old came from somewhere across the street and attempted to lure the dogs away. Shortly after the boy's arrival, both Anastasia and he were nipped on the knee by the darker, more aggressive dog. I was clawed up and down both my legs by both of these dogs. I do not remember getting up or how those dogs finally left the scene, but I did manage to get up, put back on my shoe, and find my glasses. When we got back home, I called LPD, noticed that the neighbors across the street were consoling these dogs as we waited for the first responders to come to our rescue. We were transported to St. Rita's Medical Center, ER, treated, released. The paramedic from the Lima Fire Department had more sympathy for these pit bull puppies, as he reassured me, than he did for us. Take a look at the pictures. And 2 insensitive, let's call them idiots for lack of a better term, told me I was prejudiced against pit bull puppies, or pit bulls in general. I'm prejudiced against anything that wants to attack me, whether it be dog or human. I did not breed these dogs. I did not tend to these dogs. I did not allow these dogs to get loose. I did not train these dogs. We were just the unfortunate victims of the attack. I was reassured that these dogs were executed. Euthanized sounds so sweet. Executed. I do not blame these dogs. I did not blame these dogs. Someone allowed these dogs to get loose. I just want to thank you for hearing what I had to say. I need to vent. And thank you.
Thank you. Under the consent calendar,
Mr. President,
Mr. Tevin.
I move that item A be received, filed, and approved.
Second.
The motion and the second is to receive, file, and approve item A. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries. Communication number 1.
From the Director of Community Development regarding legislation to place tax assessments.
Mr. President,
Mr. Glenn.
I move that communication number 1, receive and file legislation tonight agenda.
Second.
The motion and the second is to receive and file communication number 1. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries. Communication number 2.
From the Finance Director regarding legislation for the 2014 budget amendments.
Mr. President,
Mr. Tevin.
I move that communication number 2 be received and filed. Legislation is on tonight's agenda.
Second.
The motion and the second is to receive and file communication number 2. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries. Communication number 3.
From the Finance Director regarding legislation to allow for general fund computer purchase.
Mr. President,
Mr. Tevin.
I move that communication number 3 be received and filed. Legislation is on tonight's agenda.
Second.
The motion and the second is to receive and file communication number 3. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries. Communication number 4.
From the Mayor regarding legislation for the 2014 tax budget.
Mr. President,
Mr. Tevin.
I move that communication number 4 be received and filed. Legislation is on tonight's agenda.
Second.
The motion and the second is to receive and file communication number 4. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries. Communication number 5.
From Chief Martin regarding legislation for disbursement of funds from a law enforcement trust fund.
Mr. President,
Mr. Gordon.
I move that communication number 5 be received and filed, and legislation is on tonight's agenda.
Second.
The motion and the second is to receive and file communication number 5. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries. Communication number 6.
From the Director of Utilities regarding legislation to enter into a contract with Allen County Refuge.
Mr. President,
Mr. McLean.
I move that communication number 6 be received and filed.
Second?
The motion and the second is to receive and file communication number 6. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries. Communication number 7.
From the Director of Utilities requesting legislation to enter into a contract with Black and VTech Corporation.
Mr. President,
Mr. McLean.
I move that communication number 7 be received and filed, and authorize the law director to prepare any necessary legislation.
Second.
The motion and the second is to receive and file communication number 7 and to authorize the law director to prepare any necessary legislation. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries. Communication number 8.
From the Auditor regarding legislation to enter into contract with Perry Protech.
Mr. President,
Mrs. Miles.
I move that communication number 8 be received and filed. Legislation is on tonight's agenda.
Second.
The motion and the second is to receive and file communication number 8. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries. Communication number 9.
From the Director of Public Works regarding legislation to enter into a contract with West Erie Realty Solutions.
Mr. President,
Ms. Adams.
I move that communication number 9 be received and filed. Legislation is on tonight's agenda.
Second.
The motion and the second is to receive and file communication number 9. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries. Communication number 10.
From the Deputy Director of Utilities requesting legislation to enter into agreements with the Ohio Department of Natural Resources.
Mr. President,
Mr. McLean.
I move that communication number 10 be received and filed.
Second?
Motion and the second is to receive and file communication number 10. Is there any discussion?
Mr. President,
Mr. McLean.
do we need legislation and authorize the
You
law
want to
director
amend?
to prepare any necessary legislation?
Second?
The amended motion is to receive and file communication number 10 and to authorize the law director to prepare the necessary legislation. Is there any discussion?
Mr. President, I had one question if I could.
Mr.
Mike
Devon?
or Gary, why did this not cover all the reservoirs? This covered
Everything but
specific.
Mr. Caprella?
They're staggered. We already have
All right.
contracts for the
Okay.
other ones, so.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? The motion carries. Communication number 11.
The Deputy Director of Streets requesting legislation to purchase a patch roller.
Mr. President,
Ms. Adams.
I move that communication number 11 be received and filed, and that the law director be authorized to prepare any necessary legislation to comply with the request.
Second.
The motion and the second is to receive and file communication number 11. Is there any discussion? Sorry, I guess the motion is to receive, file, and authorize the law director to prepare the necessary legislation. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? The motion carries. Reports of committees, Human Resources Committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. Everyone has received a report from the Human Resource Committee meeting. I ask that my report be received, filed, and approved.
Second.
The motion, the second, is to receive, file, and approve the Human Resources Committee meeting report submitted by Councilor Lowe. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. The motion, those opposed? The motion carries.
Mr. President, if I could interrupt for a second. And we may have to go back to amend tonight's agenda, but if we're going to vote on the garbage and refuse contract, that legislation came out of our committee. We have to have the committee report before we can vote on it, don't we? I mean, even a verbal report.
What's the, hang on a second, what communication was that?
Communication number 6.
We authorized the legislation in the committee meeting.
Right, you should have at least an oral report that you follow up with.
Mr. President, I would move that we amend the agenda to include Utilities Committee report. Okay, Sam.
Motion, the second, is to amend the agenda to include a Utilities Committee report. All those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries. Utilities Committee report, Mr. McLean.
Okay, well, we held a meeting.
He got me.
And we talked about the garbage contract. We actually talked about a couple different things, but the garbage contract was one of our issues. The other issue was the late fee for the water billing. That was continued until we get some more information from the utilities department, so I'll go on to the garbage contract. The low bidder on the garbage contract was Allen County Refuge. I think the contract is pennies off of what we currently are paying per month. And that's a breath of fresh air simply because if you look back at appreciation of money over a 5-year period, we've maintained our constant cost at like $20.28 or 25 cents. And we're going to maintain that maybe just a little bit less in pennies for the next 7 to 8 years. So that's a plus for our community. In that contract still requires new vehicles. It still does everything that our old contract has. Plus, we've put some caveats in there to make sure that we get the service provided from Allen County Refuge that we're used to having. I think those are important parts of that contract that's going to come up. I do believe that they currently have several small cities around us, Delphus, Spencerville, I think it's Bluffton. So they have the capacity. I'm sure that by making them our contractor, some of the past employees may shift over to the new employees for Allen County Refuge, and we should have no interruption of service. Our last contract was very seamless. It worked out very good, and I have full faith that this one will too. And I would like to make a motion to accept my oral report.
Second.
The motion and second is to receive, file, and approve the committee report given by Councilor McLean. I do have one question. Did the committee make a motion to authorize the legislation?
Made a
Yes.
motion
Okay.
to authorize legislation with all ayes, no nays.
Okay, very good. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Ordinances 155-14.
Levying special assessments for property maintenance code charges on premises in the city of Lima, Ohio.
Mr. President,
Mr. Glenn.
I move that ordinance 155-14 be passed on the first reading.
Second.
The motion and the second is to pass ordinance 155-14 on its first reading. Is there any discussion? I'll have the clerk call the roll.
Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Mrs. Miles?
Yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes.
Mr. Gordon?
Yes.
Mr. McLean?
Yes.
And Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
Ordinance 155-14 has been passed on its first reading by an 8-0 vote. Ordinance 156-14.
Amending the 2014 annual budget.
Mr. President,
Mr. Tevin.
I move that ordinance 156-14 be passed on its first reading.
Second.
The motion and the second is to pass ordinance 156-14 on its first reading. Is there any discussion? I'll have the clerk call the roll.
Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Mrs. Miles?
Yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes.
Mr. Gordon?
Yes.
Mr. McLean?
Yes.
And Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
Ordinance 156-14 has been passed on its first reading by an 8-0 vote. Ordinance 157-14.
Adopting the tax budget for the next succeeding fiscal year for the city of Lima, Ohio.
Mr. President,
Mr. Tevin.
I move that ordinance 157-14 be passed on its first reading.
Second.
The motion and the second is to pass ordinance 157-14 on its first reading. Is there any discussion? I'll have the clerk call the roll.
Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Mrs. Miles?
Yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes.
Mr. Gordon?
Yes.
Mr. McLean?
Yes.
And Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
Ordinance 157-14 has been passed on its first reading by an 8-0 vote. Ordinance 158-14.
Authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract for the purchase of computers for various city departments.
Mr. President,
Mrs. Miles.
I move that ordinance number 158-14 be passed on its first reading.
Second.
The motion and the second is to pass ordinance 158-14 on its first reading. Is there any discussion? I'll have the clerk call the roll.
Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Mrs. Miles?
Yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes.
Mr. Gordon?
Yes.
Mr. McLean?
Yes.
And Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
Ordinance 158-14 has been passed on its first reading by an 8-0 vote. Ordinance 159-14.
Authorizing the auditor to make payment to the State of Ohio Environmental Protection Agency.
Mr. President,
Mr. McLean.
I move that ordinance 159-14 be passed on its first reading.
Second.
The motion and the second is to pass ordinance 159-14 on its first reading. Is there any discussion? I'll have the clerk call the roll.
Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Mrs. Miles?
Yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes.
Mr. Gordon?
Yes.
Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
Ordinance 159-14 has been passed on its first reading by an 8-0 vote. Ordinance 160-14.
Authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract for the purchase of a high-capacity 6-inch trailer-mounted pump and accessories for the utilities department.
Mr. President,
Mr. McLean.
I move that ordinance 160-14 be passed on its first reading.
Second.
The motion and the second is to pass ordinance 160-14 on its first reading. Is there any discussion? I'll have the clerk call the roll.
Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Mrs. Miles?
Yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes.
Mr. Gordon?
Yes.
Mr. McLean?
Yes.
And Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
Ordinance 160-14 has been passed on its first reading by an 8-0 vote. Ordinance 161-14.
Or is it 162? Hold on. Authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with West Erie Realty Solutions.
Mr. President,
Ms. Adams.
I move that ordinance number 161-14 be passed on its first reading.
Second.
The motion and the second is to pass ordinance 161-14 on its first reading. Is there any discussion? I'll have the clerk call the roll.
Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Mrs. Miles?
Yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes.
Mr. Gordon?
Yes.
Mr. McLean?
Yes.
And Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
Ordinance 16114 has been passed on its first reading by an 8-0 vote. Ordinance 16214.
Authorizing payment from the Law Enforcement Trust Fund.
Mr. President,
Mr. Gordon.
I move that ordinance 16214 be passed on its first reading.
The motion and the second is to pass ordinance 16214 on its first reading. Is there any discussion? I'll have the clerk call the roll.
Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Mrs. Miles?
Yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes.
Mr. Gordon?
Yes.
Mr. McLean?
Yes.
And Mr. Lowe.
Yes.
Ordinance 16214 has been passed on its first reading by an 8-0 vote. Ordinance 16314.
Authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with Allen County Refuse.
Mr. President,
Mr. McLean.
I move that ordinance 16314 be passed on its first reading.
Second.
The motion and the second is to pass ordinance 16314 on its first reading. Is there any discussion?
Mr. President,
Mr. McLean.
I know I gave you my orals synopsis of this, but I want to tell you that Gary and Mr. Caprella worked very hard on this contract. I think it's been an ongoing thing, but you know, to get these things in a proper manner and to go through the meetings that we've had and to get this accomplished as quickly as we have this year, and I appreciate their efforts and their hard work, and for my committee members that work with me. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. Is there any further discussion?
Mr. President,
Mr. Glenn?
the main thing I like about it is saving our consumer money. And it's not much though, but we getting there, you know, let's save money there. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Mr. President,
Mr. Mayor.
comment on this issue. We have had superb performance from Allied
Yes.
throughout the past 5 years.
Yeah, you did.
And I think that should, both the company should be commended for the work that they've done for our community. And I believe it should be explicitly stated that they have, in fact, established, I think, a very high level of expectations by everyone for how the contract performance should occur in the future. And that included, if you recall, at the time that we moved from Waste Management to Allied, there was a great deal of trepidation about the transition process. And I have to say that throughout the transition, I didn't get a single call from residents. So I want to commend them, but I also want our community to know that we are intent on making certain that we get the same kind of service in the next contract as well.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is there any further discussion?
Mr. President.
Mr. Lowe.
I totally agree with what our mayor has just said. Is there an out on the contract if performance isn't up to par?
Mr. President,
Mr. Mayor.
my own sense of this is that you really can't fire someone in this kind of an arrangement.
Absolutely.
Once the amount of money that's invested in equipment is made and once you've got things in place. So we have to have a different set of accountabilities designed into this contract than we have currently. And that is part of what the law department is working on with the administration to make certain that we do have some additional administrative tools that assures we get the performance on the street that we need.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? I'll have the clerk call the roll.
Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Mrs. Miles?
Yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes.
Mr. Gordon?
Yes.
Mr. McLean?
Yes.
And Mr. Lowe.
Yes.
Ordinance 16314 has been passed on its first reading by an 8-0 vote. Ordinance 16414.
Authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with Perry Protec.
Mr. President,
Mrs. Miles.
I move that ordinance 164-14 be passed on its first reading.
Second.
The motion on the second is to pass ordinance 16414 on its first reading. Is there any discussion? I'll have the clerk call the roll.
Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Mrs. Miles?
Yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes.
Mr. Gordon?
Yes.
Mr. McLean?
Yes.
And Mr. Lowe.
Yes.
Ordinance 164-14 has been passed on its first reading by an 8-0 vote. Miscellaneous business, Mr. Tevin.
Just a couple of things this evening. I mentioned in the prayer this evening the Star Spangled Spectacular. What a great event for the city to see that many people in the park, and the amount of work it took from all the volunteers, and to see law enforcement, both in the city and the county, working together to maintain the order that we have with that event is just wonderful. It's just a real plus for the city, and I just want to extend my congratulations for a successful Star Spangled Spectacular. I would like to refer two items to the Finance Committee. One is the mid-year budget review, and the second item is I would like to refer to the Finance Committee as the a discussion around the permanent fixes for heating and air conditioning systems at the old Fire Station 4, which is the LACNIP Resource Center.
Second.
The motion and the second is to refer two issues, one, the mid-year review, and two, the permanent fix for the air conditioning and heating issues at the LACNIP Neighborhood Center on Spring Street, the former fire station. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries.
That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tevin. Ms. Adams.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a couple of things this evening. Midway East will be meeting July 17th at 7 p.m. at their center at 727 East Kibbe. The City Planning Commission meeting is Wednesday, July 9th, and at 4 p.m. And then I would also like to thank Ms. Odom for the letter concerning the Ohio Attorney General Moving Ohio Forward Grant Final Report. It was an excellent report, a lot of activity in the 5th Ward. Myself and the residents that were impacted by these homes, I'd like to convey a thank you. And to the Attorney General, thank you for the funds. That had a big impact to the neighborhoods and brought stability, and that was one of the intents for this. And hope going forward that more funds will be available to us. I think the City of Lima has a good record and communication with the state, and that's what brought this opportunity to us. And hopefully going forward, because we cross our T's and dot our I's, there'll be future funding. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Ms. Adams. Mr. Glenn.
Yes, Mr. President, thank you. Mr. Geiger, have we talked about the cable road? Anybody communicate with you about that, that committee have?
Mr. President.
Mr. Geiger.
Mr. Glenn, yes, I have met with the attorney for the gentleman that has been spearheading that, and we're in the process of setting up additional meetings with the administration.
Thank you, thank you. Also, I'm gonna echo the same thing Ms. Adam echoed. We appreciate, good job there, because it's making the 6th Ward look a lot better too. You got some of them condemned houses going down, and we appreciate you guys getting that done. That's it. And I can echo the same thing she said, Doug. It's a change. It changed the people too, when they see good things like that continue happening there, getting that down and stuff. So I appreciate that. I didn't get to make it to the 4th of July. I was in a mail walk. And mail walk, I stay in the church from Thursday to Sunday. So, but I didn't get to make it, but I hear good things about it. And I was excited about how everything went. Everything went really well, and everyone did a great job. I want to commend Mr. Nieper, who organized that, did a real good job. So I know a lot of folks missed the orchestra. They didn't get to know that the orchestra was going to be there. So I was talking about it, where they was at. I think they had another contract somewhere else, so, because they landed on Friday. But that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Glenn. Mrs. Miles?
Well, Mr. President, I have to admit that this is my first year ever going to the 4th of July Spectacular. And I hate to admit that, but that is so true. And for good reasons. I'm always out of town for holiday. that's usually the time that we're out of town for vacation, so. But I was very impressed for my first appearance there. Everything seems to be running well, well organized, and I really enjoyed all the people that hadn't seen in years we met up there. So was glad to have the opportunity this year to be in town and to be able to see what the stars thing, the 4th of July event looked like in Lima, Ohio. Because most of the time I'm in a different city seeing their fireworks and seeing their activities. So it was great to be able to see my hometown and see the festivities that we had in place there. Finally, I'd like to say congratulations to the North Middle School students who will be traveling to Los Angeles. These are a bunch of kids in the 6th grade, I believe, that will be had the opportunity to go to Los Angeles for a dance performance. And I'm very, very excited because these 10 kids, most of them have never even been outside of Lima, let alone talk about going on a plane ride to Los Angeles. What started out as being like a positive after-school activity for them in the art of dance, you know, the same group that was associated with Glee saw them, and so they have been invited to go out to Los Angeles on July 18th through the 20th to perform. And so I'm very excited for these kids, and they are very excited. They've been working very hard, practicing and getting ready for their performance on that Saturday night. They will leave July 18th and will come back on the 20th. So I'm very happy for them. I'm very happy for these kids that will have an experience of their lifetime. You know, again, you know, for them to be able to be from Lima, Ohio, and to be able to go out to LA and dance before this audience, I think it's a huge opportunity for our young people in this community. And so I just want to wish them good luck and safe travel. I'm sure there's going to be some nervous kids on that plane to LA because it's not exactly a 20-minute flight. Yeah, so I wish them well, and thanks to the staff at North Middle School for getting them prepared and having the mind to have this after-school program for these kids, never thinking that it would evolve to this level, that these kids would be seen and be asked to come out to LA to perform. So congratulations to them.
Thank you. Mr. Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. President. I too want to thank Ms. Odom for all the hard work that she put into the CDBG funds. And usually while I'm up here with the chance to have a microphone in front of me, I say what's on my mind. And so one thing I want to mention is for prayers for my niece, who just had a surgery today where she had 2 rods put in her back. It's quite a thing for our family, but she's doing well and she's got through the surgery. And the only other thing I have is to remind people to be good to each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. Mr. McLean.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Star Spangled Spectacular was the event to attend on the 4th of July. You know, we started out early, like 8:30, getting ready to walk, so we walked. They had the nice 5K with about 1,200 contestants in it. That's huge for the city of Lima, which was very, very good. Very well organized. I'm telling you, I don't think we can have any better event in our city than what goes on the 4th of July. You have rides for kids, you have things to eat, you have the fireworks, you have things to do, you have music to listen to. It can't be a better place than Lima, Ohio on the 4th of July. With that said, the people that's never been there before missed it. Shame on you, because it's good. All right. Northside Neighborhood Association will have its meeting next Tuesday, the 15th at 7 p.m. in the cafeteria at St. Gerard's. I invite anyone to come. You're welcome to come to our meetings, participate, join, whatever you'd like. Again, that's Northside Neighborhood Association at 7 p.m. at the St. Gerard's cafeteria. Our meeting's on the 15th. That's all I have, Mr. President.
All right. Thank you, Mr. McLean. Mr. Lowe.
Yes. I got a question for Mr. Caprella. In communication number 10, when you say that the stocking of the ponds and the reservoir, is Martin Luther King ever on that list? And if so, can you recollect when it's ever been stocked?
Mr. President, I've never seen it on that list, no. I mean, you know, the ones that we referenced tonight, plus Williams and Bristol are the only other ones. That park is not on there, so obviously there's no agreement with them.
Okay.
So I don't know who stocks that one.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay, thank you. As I said in my report, I'm calling a meeting for July the 28th for the HR committee on the draft review of the civil service rules. And I would also like for individuals to please be mindful of the workers that we have downtown. I watched a lady today. I really felt sorry for her. I went around the block and talked to her and tried to encourage her. She was trying to do her job and block traffic from coming up North Elizabeth Street. And she was also, there was another lady on south of Elizabeth Street. And even though they were standing there with the flags, individuals felt that they could walk across the hot pavement. There was individuals that was coming out of the parking lot from area churches, conducting business with some businesses down there. And instead of walking the block, they decided that they were going to take their Explorer across the pavement, which caused them more work. I mean, we have a department that's trying to beautify the downtown. You know, some of us don't necessarily agree with the way the parking is. I said, but at the end of the day, these individuals out there trying to do a job, and both of them young ladies was very disrespected today. I just ask that if you're traveling in that area, be mindful of the cones, the workers, and slow down a little bit, and just show them a little bit more respect, please. I want to thank council for supporting moving some more money into park improvements. And this is sort of an inside joke, but I also want to say congratulations to Baby D. Mr. Nieper did a great job. If you're watching, Baby D, you did very good. As far as the 5K goes, it was fantastic. I stood on the side and watched it. It was great. So the whole day was great. Area Drumline, High Octane got to perform, and we got some good feedback from individuals. It was just a good day. It was a really good day. It made me proud to be from Lima. It really did. And that's it, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lowe. I also want to extend my congratulations to everybody that had a part in the 4th of July celebration. 21 years? This is the 21st year that this has gone on, so we've got some catching up to do, Mrs. Miles. It has been probably one of the highlights of the summer, if not the year, for the city of Lima, the residents in the surrounding area. There's a lot of work that goes into it, and including work that'll probably be starting in the next week or so, planning for next year's event. So my hat's off to all of those. It was a great day, and I believe this is probably, I don't remember any more perfect weather in many, many years for the 4th of July. Leading up to, we didn't have any rain really of any significance leading up to it. We didn't have any threat of showers the day of. Temperatures were very, very comfortable. I mean, I remember it being rain 2 days before, wondering if we can drain the lower elevation area, putting straw down to cover mud, and then dealing with 95-degree temperatures with 99% humidity the entire day. So it was really, really good. I'm also going to make some comments regarding the public hearing that we had last week and this week. Everybody had a role in this, and I think it was a very good role. It was a good and healthy discussion. But one thing that I am going to say is that regardless of opinions and regardless of the outcome, nobody should ever underestimate the amount of time, energy, and focus my associates here on council put into this issue, and that Amy Odom puts in to the issue. It is a painstaking process, and it is a rather complicated process to understand what the requirements are, what the restrictions are. We merely get it passed, we barely get the funding in the beginning of October, and we start the discussion again in February with the planning of the next year's allocation process and setting up the committee meetings. Mr. Glenn did a good job this year of putting in the educational piece. Okay? There were a lot of things that were said tonight and at the last meeting that are not factually correct. And I have a problem with that. It's one thing to say something and everybody applauds, but it's another to have to deal with the arduous facts of administering and planning that entire process. This council did a good job, fill in the blank. They did a good job understanding this process and going through it. Did everybody get everything they want? No. And it all starts with us wanting $18 million of CDBG money that we don't get. And I'm sorry, but for everybody who believes in balanced budget and everything else, the impacts at the local level, where it really sucks, are a decline in funding coming from the federal government. It wasn't that many years ago, as I said at the last meeting, that the CDBG money was close to $2 million. Then they tweaked it, created home. That took a chunk of that money. It left a lot less money in the CDBG funding. And what gets lost on this as we talk about administrative costs is that all of those administrative costs are painstakingly traced to CDBG eligible activities. So I resent some of the comments that were made because they're not factually correct. And the process of a public hearing is to get input, not to have a debate, not to have an argument. And I'll make it clear to my fellow council members. One applicant has threatened litigation. And I suggest that you refrain from any discussion and treat it as pending litigation. It was threatened to me outside during the recess. And I'm going to strongly encourage you not to engage in any conversation with the media, with anyone else, except the law director. But the fact is, even a couple of years ago, it was $1.5 million. It's going to go down even more. We've seen it from the feds. We've seen it from the state. The state balanced the budget. Woo-hoo. They took 50% of our local government fund. That's balancing the budget. It's going to hurt somewhere, and it's hurting here with the CDBG allocation. So my hat is off to each and every one of you for the effort you put into this process. Okay? And I want you to understand that while we may not agree on everything, you know, it's the old adage, the process is a hamburger tastes good until you have to watch hamburger get made. Then you kind of lose your appetite for it. And the process we have to go through with CDBG is like making hamburger. The end result, you may not get all the condiments you want, but it's a decent sandwich. And I think we put together a decent package on the CDBG. So I just want to thank you all for your patience and your efforts on that process. And my hat's off to you, Mr. Glenn, as chairman of that committee. Okay? With nothing further, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. President, I move that Lima City Council adjourn until July 28th at 7 p.m. in these chambers.
The motion, the second, is to adjourn until
21st, excuse me. I had the 28th circle.
Until July 21st at 7 p.m. in these chambers. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the motion carries and council is adjourned.